I woke up early on the morning of our 40th wedding anniversary with butterflies in my stomach. 40 years with Thomas. 4 decades of building a life, raising 3 children, and growing old together. It felt momentous. By 6:30 a.m., I had prepared a special breakfast: Belgian waffles with fresh berries, crispy bacon, and freshly squeezed orange juice. I'd set the dining table with our best china, the set we'd received as a wedding gift and only used for special occasions. A small wrapped package sat beside Thomas's plate, a vintage Omega watch I'd found at an antique shop engraved with our initials and anniversary date. I heard the shower running upstairs, then the familiar sounds of Thomas getting ready for the day. When he came downstairs at 7:05, he was already dressed in his standard business attire: charcoal suit, blue tie, polished shoes. "Morning, Lil," he said, glancing at the elaborate breakfast spread. "Wow, what's all this?" I smiled expectantly. "Good morning." Thomas checked his watch, the sleek Rolex our children had given him for his 65th birthday. "Looks great, but I've got an early meeting with the Westlake development team. Mind if I take a waffle to go?" My smile faltered as I watched him grab a waffle folded in half and wrap it in a napkin. "Big day today," he continued, oblivious. "The Westlake project might be our biggest commercial contract yet. Don't wait up, we'll probably take the clients to dinner." He leaned down to kiss my cheek, and I caught a whiff of his expensive cologne, the one I'd given him last Christmas. "Thomas," I said, my voice tight, "do you know what today is?" He paused at the door, mentally scanning his calendar. "Tuesday, right? The Westlake meeting. Then the contractor review at 2. Did I forget something else?" The innocence in his confusion was perhaps the worst part. It wasn't an act. He genuinely didn't remember. "It's our anniversary," I said quietly. 40 years today." His face fell. "Oh, Lil, I'm so sorry, I completely forgot." I finished for him, again, for the 5th year in a row. Thomas set down his briefcase, his expression contrite. "Let me cancel the morning meeting. We can have breakfast together, and I'll make reservations for dinner, somewhere nice." "Don't bother," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "You have your important meeting, the Westlake project. Go. Lil." "Just go, Thomas." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "We'll celebrate this weekend, I promise, anywhere you want to go." He blew me a kiss from the door. "Love you, and happy anniversary." The door closed behind him, leaving me alone with the elaborate breakfast, the carefully wrapped gift, and a hollow feeling that had become all too familiar. This was the 5th consecutive year Thomas had forgotten our anniversary. The previous 4 times I'd accepted his belated apologies, the rushed flowers ordered by his assistant, the makeup dinners scheduled around his convenience. I told myself it was understandable, given his demanding role as the owner of Montgomery Construction, the company he'd built from scratch when we were newlyweds. The business that had provided our comfortable life. But 40 years felt different. 40 years deserved to be remembered. I sat down at the table I'd set so carefully and poured myself a cup of coffee that had already grown cold. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca, my closest friend since college. "Happy anniversary, Lil." What romantic plans has Thomas cooked up for the big 4-0? I set the phone down without answering. What could I say? He forgot. Again. As always. Instead, I opened my laptop and mindlessly checked my email. A promotional message caught my eye. Mediterranean Dreams Luxury Cruise. Special offer. I clicked it open, gazing at the images of sunsets over sparkling waters, quaint European coastal towns, and elegant ship interiors. Back in college. Before I met Thomas, I'd planned to travel the world. I'd stuck pins in a map marking all the places I'd visit someday: Rome, Athens, Barcelona. But then came Thomas. Marriage, children, and the someday that never arrived. On impulse, I opened our joint bank account. Thomas had always been generous with money. It was time, not funds, that he held back. The account balance showed a comfortable 6 figures, more than enough for the cruise advertised in the email. I hesitated for only a moment before clicking, Book now. For 40 years, I'd put everyone else first. Today I was choosing myself. Thomas and I met in my freshman year of college. I was studying education, dreaming of teaching abroad after graduation. He was 22, working as a carpenter's apprentice, taking night classes in business. We met at a cafe where I was studying, and he was grabbing coffee before his evening class. "Is this seat taken?" he'd asked, gesturing to the chair across from me in the crowded cafe. He was handsome in a rugged way, with calloused hands and earnest brown eyes. We talked until the cafe closed, and by the end of the night, my carefully laid plans began to shift, to include this determined young man with ambitious dreams. We married 3 years later, just after my graduation. Instead of teaching in Europe as I'd planned, I took a position at a local elementary school. Thomas started his own small construction business, working punishing hours to establish himself. I supported him, completely believing in his vision, even when the business struggled in those early years. When Diana arrived 2 years into our marriage, I reduced my teaching to part-time. Charlotte followed 3 years later, and Timothy 3 years after that. With each child, my world contracted a little more, centering increasingly on our home and family. While Thomas's expanded with his growing business, I didn't resent it then. We were partners. I believed. His success was our success. I managed our household with meticulous care, raised our children to be thoughtful and accomplished, hosted dinners for Thomas's clients, and volunteered at community events where Montgomery Construction was a sponsor. I was the foundation that allowed Thomas to reach for the stars. And reach he did. Montgomery Construction grew from a small operation to one of the most respected firms in the region. Our modest starter home gave way to a spacious colonial in an exclusive neighborhood. Our children attended private schools and prestigious universities. We had, by all external measures, achieved the American dream. But somewhere along the way, Thomas stopped seeing me. I became part of the backdrop of his success. Essential but invisible, like the foundation of a beautiful building that no one notices. The first time he forgot our anniversary was our 36th. I'd made dinner reservations at the restaurant where we'd celebrated our engagement. When I called to remind him, he was genuinely shocked, then deeply apologetic. I forgave him easily. After all, he was under tremendous pressure with a major project. The second time for our 37th hurt more. I'd mentioned it just days before, yet it still slipped his mind. The third and fourth times established a pattern I could no longer ignore. Now, sitting alone at our anniversary breakfast, I realized something had fundamentally changed. Not just in Thomas, but in me. I was tired of being forgotten. After clearing away the uneaten breakfast, I called Rebecca. "He forgot again, didn't he?" she said immediately, hearing something in my voice. 5 years in a row, I confirmed a new personal record. Rebecca sighed. "Oh, Lil, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" "The usual makeup dinner where he spends the entire time checking his phone." Her words stung because they were true. The past few years' belated anniversary celebrations had featured Thomas taking business calls or sending emails between courses. "Actually," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice, "I've booked a cruise." "Really? That's wonderful. When are you two leaving?" "Not we," I corrected her. "Just me. A 3-week Mediterranean cruise. I leave in 2 weeks." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Rebecca, are you there?" "I'm here," she said finally, just picking my jaw up off the floor. "You Lillian always puts everyone else. First Montgomery are taking a solo vacation without consulting your husband. Who are you and what have you done with my friend?" I laughed, a genuine laugh that felt foreign in my throat. I think I finally reached my limit. 40 years. Rebecca, 4 decades of building his dream. Don't I deserve to pursue a little bit of mine? God, yes. You deserved it 30 years ago. Her voice softened. Does Thomas know? Not yet. I just booked it this morning. He'll find out when he gets the credit card notification, I suppose. He's going to freak out. Probably. I agreed, but I'm past caring. Our kids are grown. The business runs without my social coordination. He can manage without me for 3 weeks. Good for you, Lil, Rebecca said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. It's about damn time. After hanging up, I researched Mediterranean weather patterns for the upcoming months and made a shopping list. I would need a new wardrobe. My clothes were practical for the life of a semi-retired schoolteacher and construction company wife. Not for a luxury cruise. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of excitement about something that was entirely for me. I was still planning when my phone rang again. It was Thomas. Lil, I'm so sorry about this morning. He began sounding rushed. I've had my assistant make dinner reservations for Saturday at Bellini's. I know it's not today, but I've got this client dinner. I can't reschedule. That's fine, I replied, my voice lighter than it had been in years. I understand. You're not upset. He sounded surprised, then relieved. You're the best, Lil. I promise I'll make it up to you. Don't worry about it, I said, looking at the cruise confirmation on my laptop screen. I've made my own plans. Thomas didn't ask what I meant. He never did these days. Great, see you tonight, love you. Love you too, I replied automatically before hanging up. I turned back to my laptop and began researching shore excursions in Santorini. The Mediterranean cruise I'd booked was extravagant by any standard. A luxury liner with a balcony suite, gourmet dining, and stops at all the coastal cities. I'd dreamed of visiting in my youth. The total cost was substantial, though still a fraction of what Thomas had spent on his boat 2 years ago, a vessel he'd used perhaps 5 times since purchasing it. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared methodically. I went shopping for resort-wear sundresses and formal attire for the ship's evenings. I had my hair styled, indulged in a manicure and pedicure, and even bought new luggage. I renewed my passport, which had gathered dust since our 25th anniversary trip to Cancun, the last real vacation we'd taken together. Thomas noticed none of these changes. He was absorbed in the Westlake project, coming home late and leaving early. On the rare evenings he was home, he was distracted answering emails or taking calls. Our rescheduled anniversary dinner at Bellini's followed the familiar pattern. Thomas gave me a jewelry box containing an expensive diamond bracelet that his assistant had undoubtedly chosen. He apologized again for forgetting our anniversary, promised to do better, then took 2 business calls during our meal. I smiled and nodded at the appropriate moments, but my mind was on the ship that would carry me across the Atlantic in just a few days. I hadn't explicitly told Thomas about the cruise yet. The notification had appeared on our credit card statement, but he rarely checked those details, leaving financial management largely to me as he did most household matters. I'd packed gradually, hiding my new clothes and luggage in the rarely used guest room. The night before my departure, I finally told him. We were in our bedroom, Thomas already half asleep after another long day. I'm going on a trip tomorrow, I said quietly. He murmured. Trip where? A Mediterranean cruise, 3 weeks. This penetrated his fatigue. He propped himself up on one elbow. What are you talking about? We don't have a cruise planned. Not we, I corrected, just me. Thomas sat fully upright now. You're joking. I'm not. My ship leaves tomorrow afternoon. I've booked a car to take me to the airport at 10. Lillian, this is absurd. You can't just decide to go on a 3-week cruise by yourself without discussing it with me. I raised an eyebrow. Like you discuss your business trips with me, or how you discussed working through our anniversary. Again. That's different, he protested. That's business. This is what is this exactly? Some kind of midlife crisis. I'm 64. Thomas. Well past midlife unless I plan to live to 128. I kept my voice calm. This isn't a crisis. It's a choice. For once, I'm choosing to do something for myself. Thomas ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture of frustration. I knew well, is this because I forgot our anniversary? I apologized for that. I took you to dinner. It's not just the anniversary, I replied. It's 40 years of putting your needs, the children's needs, everyone's needs ahead of my own. I wanted to travel before we married. I never got to do that. We've traveled, he argued. We went to Cancun for our 25th. 15 years ago, and you spent half the time on conference calls? Thomas's expression shifted from confusion to hurt. I don't understand where this is coming from. I thought we were happy. You're happy, Thomas. You have everything you've ever wanted, the successful business, the beautiful home, the accomplished children. You never had to compromise your dreams. I did. I've provided well for this family. For you. Yes, you have. I acknowledged, and now I'm using those provisions to do something for myself. He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. Perhaps he was. How much did this cruise cost? Of course that would be his concern. Less than your boat, less than the Westlake Commission. You'll get next month, less than I deserve after 40 years of supporting you. Thomas fell silent, processing my words. Finally, he said, "And if I asked you not to go?" I met his gaze steadily. "I'd go anyway." Something shifted in his eyes. Then surprise, perhaps even a reluctant respect. He nodded slowly. "We'll talk when you get back." "Yes," I agreed. "We will." I turned out my bedside lamp and lay down feeling curiously light. Tomorrow I would begin the journey I'd postponed for 40 years. It wasn't exactly how I'd imagined it as a young woman. I was going alone rather than with a beloved partner, but it was still mine to claim. My stateroom on the cruise ship exceeded even my expectations. Spacious and elegantly appointed with a private balcony offering unobstructed views of the ocean, it felt like another world compared to the practical luxury of the home I shared with Thomas. The first few days at sea were an adjustment. I felt almost guilty for the indulgence of having nothing to do. No one to care for. Gradually, though, I settled into the rhythm of shipboard life: breakfast on my balcony, reading books I'd long wanted to explore, participating in activities that interested me rather than those that benefited someone else's agenda. I made friends among the other passengers, a retired doctor traveling solo after her wife's death, a vibrant couple celebrating their retirement, a professor of art history who offered informal lectures about the sites we would visit. None of them knew me as Thomas Montgomery's wife, or as Diana Charlotte and Timothy's mother. They knew me simply as Lillian, a woman enjoying a Mediterranean cruise. Thomas called the first night, his voice a mixture of concern and reproach. "Did you arrive safely?" he asked, as if I were a child on her first school trip. "Yes, the ship is lovely. We're still docked in Barcelona." "The house feels strange without you," he admitted. "I couldn't find the coffee filters this morning." "They're in the same cabinet they've been in for 12 years, I replied, "left of the sink, second shelf." "Right." He paused. "The children called. They were surprised to hear about your trip. I'd emailed our children before departing, explaining my solo adventure. Their responses had varied. Diana expressed immediate support. Charlotte voiced concern about my traveling alone, and Timothy, our peacemaker, suggested perhaps their father might join me for part of the cruise. "I'm sure they were," I said neutrally. "Diana seems to think I drove you to this." His tone suggested he found the idea ridiculous. "Did she?" I wasn't surprised. Our eldest had always been perceptive, and as a successful attorney, she recognized imbalances of power better than most. "Are you coming back, Lil?" The question caught me off guard with its vulnerability. "Of course I'm coming back. This is a vacation, not an abandonment." "It feels a bit like the latter from where I'm standing." I sighed. "Then perhaps this time apart will give you some perspective on how it feels to be forgotten while still physically present in someone's life." The silence stretched between us, filled with the static of international connection and 40 years of accumulated grievances. "I should go," I said finally. "Ship's Wi-Fi is expensive." "Of course," he replied stiffly. "Enjoy your cruise. Don't worry about anything here." After hanging up, I stepped onto my balcony. The lights of Barcelona twinkled along the coastline, promising adventures I'd deferred for too long. Whatever awaited me at home could wait 3 more weeks. For now, I belonged to myself alone. Our first port was Rome, a city I dreamed of visiting since studying Latin in high school. I joined a small group tour of the ancient ruins, marveling at structures that had witnessed millennia of human history. Standing in the Colosseum, I felt simultaneously insignificant and connected to something greater than myself. In a small trattoria near the Pantheon, I savored pasta carbonara and a glass of local wine, relishing the novelty of dining alone without feeling rushed or responsible for someone else's enjoyment. I purchased a handmade leather journal from a tiny shop and began recording my thoughts and experiences each evening. Rome, Day 1. Today I walked where Caesar walked. I touched stones that have endured for thousands of years. I made decisions based solely on my own interests. I am older than I planned to be when seeing these wonders, but perhaps I appreciate them more now than I would have at 20. The cruise continued to Greece, where the whitewashed buildings of Santorini against the deep blue sea brought tears to my eyes. In Istanbul, I wandered through the Grand Bazaar, purchasing a silk scarf in vibrant blues and greens that I would never have chosen in my carefully coordinated life at home. Thomas called every few days. His initial reproach gradually gave way to awkward updates about his daily life. I had to take my own shirts to the dry cleaner, he told me, during one call sounding faintly accusatory. Yes, that's generally how dry cleaning works, I replied, unable to keep the amusement from my voice. I always assumed you had some special arrangement with them. They knew exactly how I like my shirts. Because I told them, Thomas. Every time I went in. Another call. I tried to make that chicken dish you do, but it didn't turn out right. Did you marinate it first? Was I supposed to? These conversations revealed how little Thomas understood about the daily maintenance of his comfortable life. Maintenance I had provided invisibly for decades. Other calls were from the children, each responding differently to my unprecedented assertion of independence. Diana was enthusiastically supportive. Send more photos. Mom, you look amazing in that sundress. I've never seen you look so relaxed. Charlotte was gradually coming around. Dad seems a bit lost without you, but honestly, it's probably good for him. He called me to ask how to use the washing machine. The washing machine, Mom. Timothy, ever the diplomat. I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, but maybe consider how Dad feels too. He misses you. I listened to them all with patience, born of a lifetime of mediating family dynamics, but I no longer felt responsible for managing everyone's emotions. This journey was mine. As the cruise progressed, I felt myself changing. I stood straighter. I laughed more freely. I made decisions without automatically considering someone else's preferences first. The woman who stared back at me from the stateroom mirror looked younger somehow, her eyes brighter, her smile more genuine. In my journal, I wrote, Naples Day 18. I've spent 40 years being Thomas Montgomery's wife. Before that, I was Harold and Evelyn Mitchell's daughter. Before that, I wasn't yet myself. Who am I now at 64? Perhaps just Lillian, finally. 3 weeks passed with surprising speed. On my final night aboard, I attended the captain's dinner, wearing a midnight blue evening gown I'd purchased specifically for the cruise, a far cry from the sensible cocktail dresses that populated my closet at home. The art history professor Martin asked me to dance. As we moved across the floor, he said, "You've changed since the beginning of the cruise." Have I? I asked, though I knew it was true. You held yourself so carefully when you first came aboard, like someone accustomed to taking up as little space as possible. Now you move like you belong wherever you stand. I considered his observation. Perhaps I've remembered something I'd forgotten. What's that? That I'm more than the roles I play for other people. He nodded appreciatively. A valuable lesson at any age. Will you remember it when you return home? The question followed me back to my stateroom as I packed my belongings. Would I revert to the accommodating invisible Lillian once I returned to the life I'd built with Thomas? Or had something fundamental shifted that couldn't be undone? I had no answers yet, only the certainty that the woman returning to Boston was not identical to the one who had left. Thomas met me at the airport looking oddly vulnerable, standing at the arrivals gate with a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers. Though I was surprised he remembered, "Welcome home," he said, embracing me awkwardly. "You look different. Mediterranean sun," I replied, though we both knew the changes went deeper than a tan. The drive home was filled with his nervous chatter about developments in my absence. The Westlake project was proceeding ahead of schedule. Timothy had visited for a weekend. The neighbor's dog had had puppies. I listened, offering appropriate responses, but part of me remained on that ship watching the sunset from my private balcony, answerable to no one. At home, everything looked exactly as I'd left it, yet somehow diminished, as if my expanded perspective had shrunk the space that had once seemed more than adequate. "I kept everything just as you like it," Thomas said, mistaking my contemplative silence for criticism. "Though I did break one of the blue coffee mugs. Sorry about that." "It's fine," I assured him. "It's just a mug." We circled each other cautiously that evening, like dancers who once knew the steps but had forgotten the rhythm. When we finally sat down for the dinner, Thomas had ordered from my favorite Italian restaurant. He asked the question I'd been expecting. "Are you leaving me, Lil?" The directness of it startled me. "Why would you think that?" "3 weeks alone on a luxury cruise that you booked without telling me, it feels like a trial separation." I considered his perspective. It wasn't intended that way. It was about reclaiming something I'd given up. "Your freedom." His voice was small. "Myself," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." Thomas nodded slowly, his eyes on his untouched pasta. "I called Diana after the first week. She said some things that made me think." "What kinds of things?" "That I've taken you for granted. That forgetting our anniversary repeatedly was symptomatic of a larger pattern." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. She wasn't wrong. I waited, offering neither absolution nor accusation. "I've been selfish," he continued. "I built this life, this business with your support, and then I stopped seeing that support as essential. I started treating you like furniture, valuable furniture, that I'd be upset to lose, but still something I could just expect to be there without acknowledgement." It was perhaps the most insightful thing Thomas had said in years. "Yes," I agreed simply. "You did." "I don't want to lose you, Lillian. I don't want to be the man who didn't realize what he had until it sailed away on a Mediterranean cruise." He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "What do you want, Thomas?" He reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "A second chance, a reset. Whatever you want to call it, I want to be better, to see you clearly again." I studied our joined hands, his still strong. Despite his age, mine, newly manicured, and wearing the tanzanite ring I'd purchased in Santorini rather than my usual wedding set. "I want that too," I said finally. "But things need to change. I can't go back to being invisible." "Tell me what you need." I thought of the woman I'd become during those 3 weeks at sea, confident, decisive, joyful. "I need to matter as much as your work. I need you to see me, not just the comfort I provide. I need partnership, not caretaking." Thomas nodded, his expression solemn. "I can do that. I will do that. And I need you to remember our anniversary," I added with the ghost of a smile, "already marked on every calendar I own." He assured me, with recurring alerts starting a week before. We talked late into the night, more openly than we had in years. There were difficult truths shared on both sides, apologies offered and accepted, promises made with what felt like genuine intention. When we finally went to bed, Thomas asked, "Where do you want to go for our 41st anniversary?" "Anywhere in the world, your choice." I thought about it, then said, "I'd like to show you Santorini. The sunset there is like nothing you've ever seen." "Santorini it is," he agreed, "though this time we plan it together." As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the Lillian who had boarded that cruise, angry, resentful, desperate to be seen. She had needed that journey to remember her own worth, to reclaim the self that had been subsumed by decades of caretaking. The Lillian returning home was neither that desperate woman nor the invisible wife she had been for too long. She was something new, a woman who had remembered how to stand in her own power while remaining open to genuine partnership. I didn't know if Thomas could truly change or if our marriage would find its new balance. But for the first time in years, I was approaching our relationship not from necessity or habit, but from choice. Whatever happened next, I would face it as myself, Lillian, finally and completely. He might have forgotten our 40th anniversary for the 5th consecutive year, but in doing so, he had inadvertently given me the most valuable gift, the rediscovery of myself. And for that, at least, I could be grateful.